Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Stephen P., Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, Red from the Kaito and Red Show, Sang H., Mike from the Old Switcheroo podcast, Doug from the Nostalgia Marcanum podcast, Matt aka Stormageddon, Parallax Puddles, Ryan K., Melissa S., Pib Extra, Gilmer, and Mr. Biscuits have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, it's not even Mario month, but we're talking Mario 101. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today's episode, you heard that correct in the intro to the episode. We're talking about Mario. And you may be wondering, listeners, Josh, you never talk about Mario outside of Mario Month. I'm making an exception this time because I got a wonderful guest here with a wonderful topic. We're talking Mario 101, but it's not necessarily an introduction to Mario. I would say this is a deep dive into the minutia of Mario, and I mean that extremely complimentary, and you'll understand why in just a moment. Joining me today from the blog Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games and from the podcast Gayest Episode Ever, Drew Mackie is on the show today. Drew, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm very flattered that you broke your Mario fatwa to talk about him during a non-Mario month.
Oh, I mean, with the amount of work you put into this, how could I not? We'll talk about it. You put a lot of work into this Mario 101 article / blog that you wrote. But yeah, man, first off, just thank you once again for joining me. I've been a fan of yours for a while. I haven't had a chance to listen to a lot of Gayest Episode Ever, but I have listened to one of your other previous podcasts, Singing Mountain, which was your video game music podcast. And you started that actually little small side story. The way I found it was you advertised it on Facebook. Mm-hmm. You paid for advertising on Facebook, and I liked the name. I liked the like a video game music podcast. I thought that was interesting, but more than anything, and it kind of maybe even hints at like your the start of you getting into writing with Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games, the heartfelt post you wrote, that still actually sticks with me, where you in the post you say how you're really proud of this podcast, and so you're putting your money where your mouth is. And I'm if I didn't believe in this, I wouldn't be paying for ads for this. And I gave it a shot, and I didn't listen to every episode, but I listened to probably like 15 to 20 of them. I really liked the show quite a bit. So yeah, thank you for joining me, man.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for remembering my little forgotten child, Singing Mountain, who I do love, and I never officially finished it. And one day I will actually finish it properly. But I did it for like, I don't think quite 200 episodes, but like more than 100 for sure. Mm-hmm. And it was something that I just tried to put my own spin on a genre that a lot of people have tried to do, and some people have found a lot more success than I have found with it, and I think that's awesome. But that's one of my entries into the community of people that make media about video games.
Mm-hmm. And the other entries into the video game community is the blog that you've been running for, how many years have you been running Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games?
I think since 2022, and It's just been a very I like to use the slow food metaphor as opposed to fast food. So I used to have a personal blog, and I used to write for a living, and I really got burnt out on writing something every day, and sometimes multiple things every day, because I think it's bad for the human brain. And I was just like, what if I just did something and I sat on a project for as long as it takes and put thought into it and tried to polish it up as much as I can before it goes live and make something that reflects the amount of time that goes into it. It's kind of some of my whole philosophy about how I'm trying to break the end my bad relationship with the internet by turning it into something that's not immediate. It's something that's you can put more time into, and people will spend more time on once it goes live. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. And I can also empathize with the idea of like having to put something out at a specific intervals. Like you were saying, you were getting burned out writing every day. And I totally understand. I think, at least for me, it all depends on like the medium, obviously, but I found that like if you want to start creating something, do it at your own personal pace first, and then if you feel that you're able to kind of crank up the rhythm of it, then go to that. Like for this show, I used to do this weekly when I first started. Couldn't come up with ideas for the life of me weekly. That was exhausting.
Yeah, it's hard.
And then I went bi-weekly for a while, and even that was challenging. And then in 2020, I went weekly, and now I've been going weekly since 2020 for the last 6 years or so. But I found a rhythm to do that. Like we are recording this episode about a month or so out from its actual release date. So that's usually kind of how I handle it with the show. It's easier for me to manage it that way. It gives me editing time. So I can also empathize with the writing thing as well, because I actually also tried writing my own video game blog. I tried to do weekly blog posts, and man, that was impossible for me to do. I was having such a hard time coming up with stuff like that. Now I actually have started getting back into writing. In fact, it's by the time this episode comes out, I might actually already get it. I wrote for Darren Hupke's Pixels and Polygons, like indie zine. He was nice enough to let me write for that. I'm starting to write more personal blog posts, one of which has not come out yet. I'm waiting on some peer edits and stuff like that. But like, I'm also getting back into it. But once again, kind of similar to Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games, I'm not really looking for any specific time frame. It's just, I have an idea. When the idea is ready and baked, it will be shipped out and, posted or delivered or whatnot. So I totally understand that. Now, for my listeners, though, who don't know what you do at Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games, they understand it's a video game blog at this point, I would assume. But like, what's kind of the focus of, like, what's kind of your focus for your blog within video games?
I still haven't perfected my elevator pitch for this because it's something that's sort of hard to say quickly, but I tell people it's a video game history blog, and it's about the origins of like characters and concepts from video games. And the ways I explore those include language. So there's a lot of Japanese translation and etymology happening. And I was an English major, so I say it's like a very humanities approach to video game history, because I'm not a tech head, and I'm not talking about like the machine side of video games so much as I'm talking about these things as if they were cultural products, which they are. And they're cultural products that interact with like the greater sphere of pop culture. So I'm like, okay, video games aren't a thing that exists over on their own. There's something that are interacting with like movies and comic books and TV shows and everything else. And sometimes it happens in ways that are hard for us to spot, especially because I think maybe for Americans, at least, we tend to think about video games being like their own thing, or like a Japanese thing that comes from a culture that's not our native culture. And that's true, but also there's such an interesting give and take. I like exploring and finding surprising connections between things that you wouldn't think are related. So that, which is not an elevator pitch, that is like a thesis statement, but that's kind of what it is.
When I was looking at, because I read some of your other blog posts, not just this Mario 101 one that we're going to get into in a little bit. I read also like I included links to it when I covered Mario 2. You're writing on Birdo being like a transgender icon, which was really like such an interesting deep dive into a character that most people don't think about all that often.
Nope.
And one thing I've noticed with your writing is that when your approach to game history, like you said, it's like a humanities type of approach, but like how can I put this? You don't stop at the narrative. Most game history researchers that are in the kind of content creation sphere, I'm putting myself in this. This is not me degrading other podcasters or YouTubers, but we will, like I use Wikipedia to start off, find their sources, go to those sources, see where I can go from there and kind of like branch out that way. I don't stay at Wikipedia, just to be clear, listeners. I use that as a jumping off point, and then I find the actual sources. And if I can't read the source, I usually try not to include it in the episode, or I will mention, hey, this includes it on here and I find this interesting, but I can't get to the source to verify it. With that said, you go further than that. You go much deeper than that. And some of the things I know specifically in the Mario 101 blog is like some of the kind of themes to the facts that you kind of dive into, like etymology of names, mythologies of specific, like there's I have a whole section on my notes called Koopa mythology, where there's like random bits of like Koopa and how the name came to be, origins and mechanics. You don't seem content to just stay like, well, here's the narrative, whether popular or otherwise. Here's the narrative that we have been able to find. You dig a little bit deeper. And I was going to ask, do you find that this is I don't want to say a problem, but like not enough people look for these parallels in game history circles? Because I feel like you're the only one that I see. Not that I'm like an expert, I don't know every corner of game history preservation and research and content creation, but from what I have seen, you're the only person that I've seen do stuff where it's like what are some of the ones right here? Bowser was originally Boss Creeper, right? Mm-hmm. That was one of your fun facts from Mario 101. Even like, you know, just the very first fact, Mario may not have been named for Mario Segali. Like, you took something that was a common quote unquote fact and you dug deep into it. So like, do you find that there's not a lot of people going the next layer down? I know there's maybe Critical Kate does a lot of good research. She is a crazy good researcher with that. But like, do you find that something that you don't see a lot online?
That it isn't, I think, because we are people that came of age when Wikipedia was a thing. And I think everyone knows how to use Wikipedia, but a lot of times that the narrative that's stated on Wikipedia tends to be what everyone assumes is like, okay, so this is basically true. And then I'm going to go find the sources that prove the narrative as it's stated on Wikipedia. And because I'm a little bit of a heretic and a contrarian, I like to be like, wait, but like, what about all the evidence that points in a different direction? Like with the Mario Segale thing, it probably was Mario Segale, the real life landlord of Nintendo of America, who got the character named after him. But like, there's a lot of interviews with Shigeru Miyamoto, who is the creator of Mario, where he states the events of Mario's creation differently and doesn't mention Mario Segale. And that is really interesting that the popular narrative doesn't really account for these contradictions. And I wanted to write about all the versions of the story that get left out because they do have value and we should find a way to account for them. I might need to add a little bit of a update to that particular item. Someone, it was Chris Kohler, pointed out that Shigeru Miyamoto was not active in the Nintendo of America office, and he was clearly named by the Nintendo of America employees, and that might account for why he kept getting versions of the story wrong. And he didn't know, but since he is the person that we go to for all this information, he might have just been doing his best to tell a story that he'd only heard secondhand. And I think even that is worth actually thinking about, that actually Shigeru Miyamoto didn't have anything to do with Mario being named. It was all a bunch of Americans and the few Japanese employees that were working at Nintendo of America in Washington that made that decision. And that's interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That he didn't have control over that, and we sort of just give him I don't like to say word of God, but the stuff that he says has the weight of a word of God in a lot of video game circles, and that's understandable because he's a great guy, but also he's just a guy, and his memory of stuff that happened decades ago is not always going to be perfect, and also he is going to fall victim to corporate mythology where a lot of times in a corporate environment you'll just be told here's the reason for why that is. And you kind of invent your own, literally it's a myth that just is situated in a workplace. And that might be a way that someone's mapping over all the more complicated facts of the matter without having to investigate them.
And I think also it's human nature to do this, but I feel like especially in almost any medium, I shouldn't say medium, and anyone looking back at history, we like to give credit as humans to one person for a big accomplishment of whatever it may be. And that's not necessarily because we want to just write someone out of history. It's because it's easy to do this. It's easy to say, well, oh, Miyamoto created Mario. Mm-hmm. And that's true. He's one of the principal engineers of it, but it's not just him. This episode it'll be like a month or so. By the time this episode comes out, this episode that I'm referencing of Retronauts will be a month or so old, but they did a Takashi Tezuka like kind of retrospective, and just like since Tezuka is retiring, they wanted to kind of give him his flowers. Mm-hmm. And they talk about it a bit on that episode too, where it's like, you know, people give Miyamoto all this credit, but Tezuka like was the designer of a lot of the mechanics that we know and love in Mario. Yeah. He is one of the most important figureheads at Nintendo. And once again, even him, it's not even just him. It's a whole team of people that have worked on these things. And even with just this one fact of, you know, Mario may not have been named after Mario Segale, or maybe he was, who knows. Mm-hmm. You literally just brought up things that I had never even considered. Miyamoto is a secondhand witness, a secondhand account to the naming of Mario, which you don't think about that often. You just think, oh, he created Mario, so he had the name. No, he created maybe the character and some of the visual design and all this other stuff. But the naming of it, part of the thing that we know and love about this character, one of the big parts, his freaking name, he's a secondhand witness, which and as you know, if you're trying to do research into history, you want primary accounts. He's not a primary account for the naming of Mario, which is a fucking wild thing to think about.
Right. And we don't have much of a choice because, like, the episode of Retronauts that was about Takashi Tezuka was great. And it made me want them to do a bunch of episodes about, like, other people at Nintendo, giving them their flowers for things they've done. But that's going to be really hard to do because the way a company like Nintendo works, they don't tell us, really. They're not, unless it comes up in like whatever we're calling Iwata Asks now, which they still do sometimes do. They're not really going to be super open about like who contributed what. And that makes sense, but it also means that like there's a bunch of episodes that Retronauts never going to get to do about like a bunch of other longtime Nintendo employees who are part of a machine, and they're probably very happy to be part of that machine, but everyone's just like, oh yeah, like Miyamoto does everything. It's like people who think that Matt Groening writes every episode of The Simpsons, and you're like, that's actually like, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I understand why you think that was the case.
Same in a completely random thing, but something I've been thinking about. Bill Lawrence, the creator of Scrubs, like he's Ted Lasso, he's Shrinking, he's Scrubs, he's
Rooster. Rooster's the new one on HBO Max with Steve Carell.
Oh, he has a new show out now.
Rooster, yeah. Apparently, people really seem to like it. I haven't watched it yet, but I really like Shrinking. So,
goddamn, Billy Law has been like that's my nickname for him. He doesn't know that. Billy Law has been like just has his hands, but like it's not just him. And in fact, apparently, the Scrubs reboot. I saw an interview recently with Zach Braff who was like, yeah, Bill signed off on it, but he really wasn't there for most of it. Like he gave his spirit to it, but it was a lot of the creative effort for the reboot was done with Zach Braff and the cast and everyone and the writers and everything. But to bring it back to video games, talking about The Simpsons reminded me of Scrubs. That's one of my favorite shows. That's why it's in my head right now. But we give credit to singular people for team efforts a lot, and it's just because it's easy. Now, I want to move on to real quick. Not really move on, but we've already kind of danced around a little bit some of the fun facts for this Mario 101 blog. So I want to, for my listeners, I want to ask in a nutshell, what is Mario 101? Like what was kind of like the focus of this very lengthy, it was I think it was like 20,000 words, right? It was very long piece.
40,000.
40,000. Jesus Christ. So what is the focus of Mario 101?
So the idea came from collecting all the little bits that I didn't necessarily think were worth their own posts that I just had in like a Google Doc. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to throw them all together And initially the idea was it would be the 101st post on my website, but then it took long to do, and we blew past that. But that's where the idea for 101 came in, and that's why there's 101 items. But the idea was, even though it's a lot of text, it would be like bite-sized, like short stories about Mario history that people could like jump into. Like, this is the kind of thing where I want people to find during a slow day at work. And they're like, okay, I'll read that. And then just kind of scroll. And then it's like time to go. And you're like, oh, fuck, I read the entire website on accident and I didn't get any work done today, which I loved when I worked at an office and could like afford to do that. I can't afford to do that because I work at home now. But it is that kind of thing where it's you can kind of jump in anywhere and you can kind of jump to the era or the characters that are most appealing to you. And hopefully, no matter who you are, I'd give something that was new and be like, oh, I never thought of that before. And you get to maybe post it on social media and be like, hey, I read this one cool thing, link to the entire page. Maybe someone else will do the same thing the next day. And it would just be all these little stories. And then it slowly turned into bigger things, many of which, and it could have been their own posts, it turns out, because there was always more there. And I was doing this unorthodox version of Mario history where I was exploring other avenues that aren't popularly explored in the narrative we usually give to how these things came to be.
And like I said at the beginning, like you in your blog in general, but in this article specifically, like there's a lot of deep dive, just like going into things that you would not really think to go into. Like you said, people don't really look into it. Fact number 19, the Koopa branding doesn't really exist in Japan. Like, why is us Americans really think about that? We wouldn't, because we think about everything from kind of our North American centric viewpoint, and for better or worse, that has affected a lot of game history writing.
Yes,
probably. I think at this point now it's for worse. So there's been a lot that just not get talked about. But yeah, like stuff like that. Now, before we go into some more of the specifics of Mario 101, I want to ask you on a personal level about your personal history with Mario, because no one who writes 40,000 words about Mario just likes Mario casually.
It was the first thing I ever liked. It was the first thing that like really I encountered it slightly before The Simpsons started, and that was the second thing I really liked. And it turns out that those are two things you can take with you through your entire life, which I think 7-year-old me would be very surprised to learn. Like, hey, when you're in your mid-40s, you're still going to be playing new Mario games and watching new episodes of The Simpsons. I'd be like, wow, that's probably not how most things turn out in life. Weird. I liked them for all the reasons everyone likes Mario, and I liked the way that they sort of didn't make sense, and it seemed like there was more that we weren't getting. And then it turned out there was more that we weren't getting because we were speaking the wrong language, it turns out. And like that stuff was locked away in the original Japanese version. But even in the original Japanese version, there's stuff that like doesn't quite make sense and is never really explored by the games. And it kind of leaves it up to your imagination. And if you're a kid who really likes video games and doesn't love school, then you kind of sit there thinking about video games all day and wonder what, why is the princess in charge of the kingdom if she's a princess? Shouldn't she be the queen? Does she have a dad? Like, why do we see her dad in like the comics and the cartoons in the movie? But like, there's never a king mushroom in the video games. That's really weird. And then I don't learn how to do multiplication until later because I wasn't paying attention, because this is what I was thinking about when I was a kid. So it was both a thing I really enjoyed and a thing I enjoyed thinking about, and like kind of just entertaining these things quietly in my head, because I grew up in a small town and going really deep on nerdy things wasn't the most socially acceptable thing when I was a kid. And then all of this stayed in my head until adulthood, and then just like came out just like word vomit eventually. And I'm like, I have a lot of things in me that I need to get out, and this is the latest incarnation of the word vomit, to be ineloquent about it.
I can resonate with that so much you don't even know. Like, I joke around on the podcast, and I joke around with my wife where like I would probably be driving my wife crazy with video game talk if it wasn't for this podcast.
Right.
Like whoever my partner ended up being, even if it wasn't my wife, I would be driving them nuts with just like, oh, what about this? What about that? Like, I'll play a video game and then I feel like at least with the podcast, it's given me a venue to have a conversation that you would not normally have in any other context. You don't normally go to a bar and spend 3 hours dissecting Mario's jump physics.
No, you don't, unfortunately. It'd be great if we did, and it's great that people can go to a bar and talk like sports in that way, or like other stuff that's a little bit more mainstream and acceptable. Not that Mario is like a deep cut by any means, but like, yeah, there's like there are forums for this sort of discourse about like other subjects. But like I had to make a website where I'm like, this is about really specific nerd stuff, and you've already decided if you want to read this or not. So like, if you want to read it, go nuts and have fun. But like, if you don't, just go. It's not going to be for you. It's absolutely fine, and it's not something I can really share with that many people in like my friend group, because the people I know in real life, they don't necessarily care about this as much as like a scattered group of weirdos on Blue Sky. But fortunately that group does exist, and this project connected with several of them, which is gratifying, you know.
I believe it. And I mean, I'm happy too, because I think the work you do at Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games is really good. Like I don't get as much chance to read in general as I would like, but the stuff I have read, like I was saying before, all the topics you focus on are not just basic ass topics, like topics that I would focus on for my podcast. Most of my podcast is like, here's a game, here's our thoughts on it, here's us trying to break down the mechanics, which is fine and good and important in some way because it's adding to the cultural conversation about games and media and whatnot. But something I also like to do on the podcast when something kind of strikes my fancy is highlight elements of video game culture, video game history, and video games in general that are not just the kind of normal treaded paths. And that's what I like about your blog, is because it's not that. It's not just, well, did you know that, Nintendo got sued by Universal and freaking, that's how for Donkey Kong, because it was so close to King. Like, I think there's places for that. And that, to me, those are stories for people who are like, if I'm trying to tell people who aren't into video games, like, here's a fun fact about video games that you may not know. I'm not going to tell them about like, Mario's jump arc, or like freaking how the MMC chips in NES cartridges work. But I would tell them, like Nintendo helped create the PlayStation, something like that, because people outside of that would find it interesting. So what I love about your stuff is that for the people who are already in the shit, people who are already in this type of sphere, this is the next layer deep. And that's what I like to highlight stuff like this, because I'll be honest, man, I don't have the patience to do the amount of research you do. I just straight up don't. So God bless you for doing it.
Well, I am single and I have 2 dogs, and I drink a lot less now. So I had to do something with all this time. And it turned out doing really obscure research into video game history was what did it. So
man, I mean, if I wasn't a dad, I'd probably have more time for stuff like that too. But at the same, even then, I don't think I'd have the patience. When I was single and I wasn't a dad, I don't think I had the patience for it. So even with those caveats, you're still doing a crazy amount of work. To move on though, just some of the things I mentioned before, there is a lot of themes that I noticed within some of your fun facts. And it's not a comprehensive list by any stretch, but like, for example, I mentioned before the etymology of names and titles. Just some of the fun facts without going into anything. We can talk about these specifically if there's any others that pop into your head. Before Koopa Troopa, it was Shell Creeper, and before that, it was Mr. Turtle. So you looked at the entire history of this was what Koopa Troopa was, but you weren't content to stop there. You're like, well, where did that come from? And you kept on digging deeper and deeper. Bowser was originally Boss Creeper. Peach wasn't named so much for the food as the color. And then one of the most fascinating ones to me, the Bob-omb one. Bob-omb did not actually debut in Super Mario Bros. 2.
Yeah. It's a really weird thing, and it's such a pedantic point to point out, but like it is the popular version of how we think Bob-ombs entered the Mario series is from Mario 2, because that makes sense, but it is in fact not true. And if anything, Mario 2 inspired a very similar character who debuted in Mario 3. And that's the character that we have. And I love Mario 2. I don't want to take anything away from Mario 2 because it still doesn't get quite the respect that it deserves in the canon of the mainline games. But that is one thing it, in fact, did not get credit for due to a very strange set of coincidences, basically.
I think even one of the biggest things that I didn't even think about was that Mario 3, the actual Mario 3, was already out in Japan by the time we got Mario 2 in the US. So, yeah.
Almost. I think Mario 2 came out in the US, and then a few weeks later, Mario 3 came out, but Mario 3 was in process way before there was any idea that they were going to make a special Mario 2 for the West.
Okay. Yeah, like just stuff like that. I guess like how do you track down some of these fun facts? Because like some of this stuff is not like easy to find. Like where like do you like troll like shmuppalations a lot, or do you like I don't know where to like, because some of the stuff you have, like even specifically back to the Bob-omb one, you have like it's a screenshot, I guess, of a manual page. I can't read Japanese. Translation, its walking looks cute, but very careful when it flashes. It looks like it's from a manual. I can't tell though.
It's from this book called The Perfect Mario Encyclopedia. It has a Japanese name. It's never been translated into English. And I found out that this existed probably from just maybe on the Super Mario Wiki, because it comes up here and there. And it was this paperback book that Nintendo put out that it's right here in front of me on my desk. And it is like until like Wario Land 2 maybe is when it stops. It's every Mario character that ever appeared up until that point.
And is it like an official Nintendo book too?
Yes.
Wow.
With illustrations for like every minor character. I was like, well, I have to own that. And as a result of working with so much Japanese translation, I can kind of read some Japanese now, but like I'm obviously can't sit down with a book, even a book for children, and know what it's talking about. So I have a partner in crime whose name is Fatima, and Fatima lives in Japan most of the time. She's American, but she works as a translator and localizer for anime, video games, kind of whatever people are doing over there.
Okay, cool.
And I pay her to translate. So I'm like, here's a random thing. I need you to translate these 2 pages about Bob-ombs. And I don't know if Fatima knows about Bob-ombs necessarily, because just because I know about a video game doesn't mean that it's something she knows. But she rolls with it and translates the entire page and tells me what it's saying. And that is some of the proof I give that because there's something that is stated in the Japanese text on those pages proves my point that the Bob-ombs did not actually come from Mario 2. So like I send away for Japanese materials and have Fatima translate them. I buy a lot of Japanese magazines that where someone has translated something through paraphrasing rather than an explicit word for word translation. And I'm like, oh, I don't think the English language internet has an actual translation of this text. So I will do it, and Fatima will do it, and I will pay her to do it, and then I'll put it online, and we'll have something that's a little bit clearer. Or at the very least, because people translate stuff differently, it's a different take on the original Japanese.
Yeah,
that maybe puts it in different words in English that like might mean something slightly different than what we thought. I read Japanese Wikipedia and I get those sources, and I read about where people think ideas come from. And I'm like, where's the oldest place you can think of that taught you, for example, that Mario should be shorter than the princesses he rescues, which is something that Nintendo has said. And then I try to find the oldest version of that. And then I try to go back and further and try to see if there's a version of it in Japanese, and try to find how old is this thing? Does it actually exist in like the official canon? Is it something that exists in the West but not the East? Stuff like that.
That one specifically, I remember that fun fact, because you have a screen grab from, oh my gosh, it's a Game Boy Color game, the Super Mario I can't remember. It's like a remix of like some of them. I can't remember what it was, but you see Luigi holding Peach's hands and Peach is standing up, and then you see Mario holding her hands, and she is like bent over trying to get to his level.
It was Super Mario Brothers DX, which was the Game Boy Color remix. And yeah, I think it's so funny that they did Mario so dirty like that by like, yes, when Peach is congratulating Luigi, she's just like, thank you, sir. And when she's congratulating Mario, she's like, you're a cute little thing. Thank you so much. And I was like, oh, this is really
We're supposed to be dating, Peach.
Yeah. Probably not going to happen. I mean, you know what? Maybe she liked a short king.
Yeah, but she stands a short king, you know? Yeah. Something, and speaking of Japanese magazines, there was one that actually blew my mind too. The Popeye magazine.
Is that wild? So that's Kate. That's Kate Willert, says Critical Kate, who brought that to my attention. But that is such a wild thing. And I actually just talked to her recently about this. And she's like, okay, I think I have a theory that might be in a future video. So there might be clarity on how this happened. But if people don't know, it's this wild thing where we have the official story for how Mario got his look. And like anyone who knows anything about Nintendo knows that like he was designed with overalls with a different colored shirt so you could see his arms moving. And basically every facet of the way Mario looks in Donkey Kong was a response to the technical restraints of pixel art in that game. And that makes sense. But there's also this random men's magazine called Popeye, which is named for the Sailor Man, which is a weird thing all to its own. But there's an issue that ran before Donkey Kong came out that features a guy on the cover wearing red overalls, a blue shirt, and he has a mustache. And he looks like a hardworking blue collar type, which is what Mario's supposed to be. And there's just not an accounting for this weird coincidence. And I was happy to just leave it as an unexplainable coincidence. But Kate has some theories, so I hopefully maybe by the time this episode goes live, that'll be up and helping to explain why this might have come from. But it's just another example of like, it's another part of the story that just gets left out all the time.
To add further legitimacy to that kind of weird coincidence, Donkey Kong was, we all know, Donkey Kong was originally going to be a Popeye game. So you have a Popeye magazine with a dude that looks like Mario in a game that was supposed to be Popeye but is now Donkey Kong, and they look very similar. Like that's a set of weird coincidences that I think smartly, which is why you include on here, cannot really be overlooked.
It feels like I'm getting Ancient Alien sometimes when I talk about this. But another thing that Kate has pointed out is that the logo for the Popeye arcade game that Nintendo eventually did make after they failed to make it and ended up turning into Donkey Kong, that logo is the same logo as the Popeye magazine. It's just like this weird bubble letter thing, and it's not associated with Popeye the Sailor Man outside of that one magazine. It's the logo of the magazine that is doubled in the Nintendo title screen for Popeye Arcade. And you're just like, well, shit. Like, that's really weird. And again, I can't turn it into a satisfying narrative at this point. But someone might one day. It might be Kate.
I think sometimes leaving something up to a mystery is the narrative itself. Like, sometimes having something be like, hey, these all things seem to connect. We can't connect them. But isn't this weird? And as long as it's not like anything serious, like, you know, Alex Jones shit where it has actual real world consequences, it's all video game based, that's fun. That's a fun like mystery and conspiracy theory to like go down the rabbit hole with. And I think that it kind of reminds me also, remember the video game urban legend Polybius, right? That haunted arcade machine, or that was like not haunted, but the arcade machine that was hypnotizing children and causing them to die and all this other shit. Like that type of thing is like, you're not really going to get an answer for it because it's kind of between all the pop culture and all the fucking whisper down the lane and, you know, rumors and all this other stuff. So many things have been put out there. And a lot of people have tried to do research on it, and it's there's not really been enough to substantiate it, but the rumor is out there for a reason. It's kind of fun just to kind of leave it at that. Like, just that is the narrative. I almost kind of like maybe Popeye, maybe the Popeye magazine is like the Bigfoot of video games, right? Where it's like, well, this connection is there, but we can't prove it. We've seen videos of Bigfoot, but we can't prove, you know, even though all those are, anyway, maybe that's not the best comparison. I was thinking more like urban legends type of thing, but I do think that like you don't always need a satisfying narrative if you have a satisfying mystery, is what I'm trying to say.
I do love a good mystery, and it is continued to seem very mysterious to me how often Popeye comes up when like researching something that I don't think will relate back to Popeye. Do you want to know one that I didn't actually include because I was limiting myself to 101 items? Okay. So one of the things they have in there is that I think Pauline predates Mario. It's towards the end. It's in the last page. But I think Pauline was actually introduced in Sheriff. There's a female love interest in Sheriff, which is Nintendo's first narrative arcade game where you play the sheriff and you're rescuing the damsel. But she looks specifically like some of the early art of Pauline when she's lady, which she sort of looks like a schoolmarm. She looks like she comes from a Western setting rather than the sexy lady in the red dress. And I think this is actually Pauline debuting before Donkey Kong or Mario. And there's also other instances where it looks like Pauline was playable or was going to be playable. And she was initially supposed to be like the player 2 that Nintendo was going to use opposite Mario. But if that's the case, there's a really weird parallel with Popeye in that eventually this game series ended up becoming Mario's thing. Mario kind of took it from her, and we sort of forgot about Pauline for decades, and she waited to, be asked to join a Mario Kart. Popeye's actually the same way. Popeye was originally about olive oil, and Popeye was introduced to the series late. And Popeye ended up being such a popular character that he stole the series from her. And it's so interesting that the same thing happened to Pauline and olive oil. And also, Pauline is olive oil. Like, Pauline exists because olive oil didn't end up in that first game. And I'm like, that is really weird. But like, it's probably just a weird coincidence. But like, goddamn Popeye, just like so much more omnipresent in video game history than you'd expect. And like, I grew up with Popeye still being a thing. I don't think he's really a thing anymore. It's just astounding the reach of this old tiny IP that you kind of think is dead in the water, but it's alive.
But for some reason was really popular in Japan in the 70s and 80s. Like it's just very interesting.
I have somewhere around here. There's a Style magazine that did a Mario series, and I got that translated as well. And the name of the magazine is Brutus. And I had this magazine in my house for like a long time before I realized, I'm like, oh, it's a spinoff to Popeye because Brutus is their name for Bluto. I was like, oh, god damn it. And literally it was on my desk and I was just looking at it for like weeks on end. And I was looking at it one day and I'm like, oh, it's named for Bluto. That's so weird. Anyway.
That's so odd. I feel like that, like, either through Thrilling Tales of Video Games or Critical Gate, I could see doing a video on this, like the etymology of Popeye in video games, like the influence of Popeye in video games type of thing.
I did a post. There's a post where I talk about how Popeye invented power-ups.
Oh yeah, because the spinach.
Yep, that is.
It even has a little jingle.
It has a little, and also the jingle where when the music plays when he's turning into like Muscleman Popeye. There is a theory that that's also where we got transformation sequences from, like in Sailor Moon, but also He-Man.
Oh, wow.
It is this generative thing, and I don't even really like Popeye very much, but I now have to know a lot about it because of how much it seems to have affected pop culture by virtue of his popularity in Japan.
I know you're good friends with Bob Mackey and Henry Gilbert. Have they done, because I haven't listened to a whole lot of What a Cartoon, have they done Popeye on What a Cartoon?
I don't know if they have. I feel like I would have listened to it if they had. But there is always the chance that a good friend of yours does an episode and it slips by. But off the top of my head, I don't know. But if they did, I'm sure they would have a lot to talk about.
I believe it. Something else I noticed in perusing and reading a bunch of the different fun facts in here, Miyamoto contradicts himself a lot. I was wondering how... Like, did you find that to be, is that just my perception, or was like in doing research, was there just, how frustrated were you getting with Miyamoto with his like back and forth on different things?
I'm okay with it. I don't quite understand it, but like, people are asking you questions about this thing you've been working on for decades, and the human memory is faulty. Even like a young person will remember something incorrectly more than once. But like with the Alice in Wonderland thing, it is really weird that he seems to have said the opposite in relatively close proximity. I don't know. I try to theorize why he might have a desire to distance Mario from Alice in Wonderland, but I don't really have a good answer. And it's not frustrating because I was a newspaper journalist for a long time, and I know that people are usually trying their best to remember what happened, and memory's unreliable and not great. And it just happens that he is a relatively famous person who keeps getting asked the same questions again and again. And most of us gets out free where like no one cares what we say. And it's stuff we said decades ago isn't being analyzed by nerds online, like, decades later. Yeah. So it's a very specific case. And I think if he was confronted with it, he'd probably be embarrassed. He'd be like, oh, I thought I was honestly answering every single time. But it is because he is our access to most of these things that it makes it really hard to know what to think. Yeah. Because the word of God contradicted itself.
I mean, well, the Bible does that in real life anyway, so it's not that different from the
that is a good point. That is a good point. Yeah.
I also wonder too, like not that I can relate to Miyamoto in any stretch of the sense, but as someone who I've been podcasting for 10 years, I've guested on dozens and dozens of podcasts and stuff like that. I've said a lot of random shit, either about myself or random opinions that I've probably contradicted 1,000 times over in my show. So I'm just talking about from my perspective as just a small-time podcaster. I can only imagine a man who gets as many interviews as he does. You're gonna say stuff that contradicts at some point.
Yeah. Literally, I had someone. This is a while ago. This is when I was still on Twitter. They tweeted at me and they're like, "In this episode, you said that you had seen this movie, but in this episode, you said you hadn't." And I'm like, "Okay, I have no answer for this, and I don't remember seeing this movie. I don't know why I would have lied or like falsely remembered this at the time." What answer do you want? And then I just wanted to put it out to you. But I'm, okay, well, you got me. My brain is mush. But yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because there'll be periodically where I will get like a message on my Discord. Where they'll say, I'm listening, or they'll just say, Josh, do you remember blah, blah, blah? Like, not that I said blah, 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 but like they'll just reference something hyper specific that I said in an episode. And it could even be from last week's episode. I'll be like, guys, I recorded that a month ago. I don't remember what I said half the time. Yeah. It's just stream of conscious 90% of the time. I'm amazed I sound coherent in any semblance in most of my podcasts.
Yeah, they're fortunate that you sound coherent at all. One of the reasons I'm no longer I'm phasing out gayest episode ever is that I'm not built for that sort of environment, and also I do get tired of people being like calling you out on something or asking you about something that they just heard, so it seems recent to them. And I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then like eventually you have to drag out of them that it's from a podcast. And you're like, okay, great. Which podcast did you hear it on? And what episode? And they're like, well, I don't know. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you because there's such a catalog of things I've said. And like you, my brain flushes these out because I have to remember where my house is and like how to drive a car. So if I remembered everything I said on a podcast, I wouldn't do that anymore. So
I get that entirely.
Yeah.
What were some other to get back to Mario 101? What were some other fun facts that were left on the cutting room floor? Because there was you mentioned at the final part on part 7. That's right, listeners. There's 7 parts, 7 full pages to this monstrous blog post here. But you mentioned at the very end that like there was a bunch of stuff that you could probably do more. You could have gone over 101. So are there any ones that you did not make the cut that jump out to you at all?
There was one about the swimming physics from Super Mario Brothers was lifted from Balloon Fight, and which makes sense now once it's pointed out to you, but I didn't know that until I was researching this, and I'm like, that's pretty cool, but like I just had to cut some stuff, and so eventually I'll do like a bonus section and put all the stuff back in. There is a part on Peach's dad, who is a character that doesn't exist in the games, but like is in every single adaptation because something about humans telling a story need to give the woman in charge a dad who's more in charge, which is weird.
Patriarchy at its finest, baby.
I wanted to do one on how everyone always wants there to be like Wario version of Peach who exists. That character already exists. Her name is Captain Syrup, and she's the recurring villain in the Wario Land games, and she's Wario's rival. She essentially is a bad Peach, and not that will make anyone feel better about not having, Wa Peach in a Mario Tennis game, but that character does technically exist, and that was one. Captain Syrup did not make the cut because she's just not popular enough.
Do you think that she's called Captain Syrup because if you leave a peach out long enough to like, this may be a little gross, to like rot or mold, it gets gooey?
Like gooey. Yeah, that is a really interesting point that I had not thought of until now.
I feel like it's a stretch.
Maybe it is. I feel like I'm racking my brain to think if I can think of another character named Syrup, because it's such a that's a Western word, but that's not a name that a Westerner would ever give a female character, and it's a really weird choice. I have no explanation for it.
I guess we'd have to see what the original Japanese name for her was. Was it Syrup?
It's Shirapu, yeah. So it's still okay. It's still Syrup. That's what they wanted her to be. Her name of her crew might be the Brown Sugar Pirates. So doesn't really. I mean, syrup doesn't come from brown sugar though. So see, I didn't write this one. I will make this happen. I will make this happen for an update or a standalone post. I'll figure out what the hell's going on with Captain Syrup and why that's her weird name.
That's really funny. One of the other ones that like really blew my mind was the P-Wing. I did not realize that the P-Wing for those, for all you Mario 3 stands out there, the P-Wing from Mario 3, iconic power-up item. It lets you fly through a whole level. It's awesome. I had no idea that the P in it is from the onomatopoeia in Japan for flapping wings. Pada 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 pada.
Which is the paratrooper's name in Japan. And so you're literally, Mario is stealing the wings off a paratrooper and putting them on himself and allowing himself to fly.
And and so since it's a paratrooper, they take the pada off. Oh my god, that's so surreal. Like because you always this is not necessarily meant to insult AVGN, but like when you see like Mario 3 on AVGN, he talks about P-Wing, is there piss everywhere, stuff like that. So that's like unfortunately the first thing that pops in my mind, but no, it's an onomatopoeia for pada 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 pada, which is pretty funny.
And there's a ton of P's in the Mario games, and most of the time we don't know what the P stands for. Like the P switches, I don't think it's ever made clear what a P switch stands for, but it's probably not the same key.
Do you think it's pop? Like it's a pop sound when you click it down?
I mean,
that's all speculation. I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, that could be the case. I believe that it's only ever just like when you're seeing the Japanese manual, I think it's like our P and then switch written out in katakana. So
that's weird. In doing research for this, were there any fun facts that you came across that really surprised you, where you weren't expecting that to be you either a connection that you found that you weren't expecting to find, or just a fun fact that like really just blew your mind?
So the one that did the most, and I kind of like underreported on the whole Universal Studios lawsuit against Nintendo over King Kong and Donkey Kong, because I will read those the papers are online now, and I can like go through them one by one, and that seems like a huge research project in its own right. And I didn't do that for this, but do you know who Dino De Laurentiis is? Famous film producer.
The name sounds familiar, but I don't think I'm that familiar with their work.
So he's done a ton of stuff. He's Giada De Laurentiis' grandfather, I think, the olive oil lady. But he is also producer of like a bunch of like Conan and a bunch of mostly B movies. Like he did all of the movies in the Hannibal Lecter series, except for Silence of the Lambs, our Dino De Laurentiis movie. He did Dune, the David Lynch Dune.
Okay.
He just had his hands in a bunch of weird stuff. And he is weirdly a hero in the Mario story because actually, let me 1 second. I want to make sure I don't fuck this up.
No worries.
Okay, so have you ever seen the 1976 King Kong?
No, actually, but I do know. I believe isn't Jessica Chastain in it from American Horror Story? No, was that
Jessica Lange? Yeah,
Jessica Lange. Sorry, not Chastain. Jessica Lange. Thank you.
Yes. So this was something that was made as a result of a big bidding war between Universal and Dino De Laurentiis' production company, and there was a lawsuit over that. And eventually, Dino got to make his movie, and Universal made some money off of that production, even though it wasn't their movie, because there was some claim over who got the right to make the movie or whatever. And then eventually there was the Nintendo lawsuit over whether... So, see, back up 1 second. That movie came out. Subsequent to that movie coming out, Universal Studios got the rights to make their own King Kong movie, and we're going to make it fairly soon after. It didn't actually end up happening until the Peter Jackson movie in like...
2005, I think.
So like it took that long for them to actually make their own Universal Studios King Kong movie happen. Weird story. But because they own the rights to make King Kong, they're the ones that sued Nintendo over Donkey Kong, saying it was too close to King Kong. And of course, Nintendo won. And one of the reasons they won is that the lawyers working for Nintendo found that when Dino De Laurentiis' lawyers were originally suing Universal Studios, they discovered that a novelization for King Kong based on the original movie had lapsed into public domain. And because Dino De Laurentiis' lawyers discovered this, that is one of the reasons that Nintendo emerged victorious in the lawsuit that Universal Studios tried to use to stop them from making any more Donkey Kong. And because Dino De Laurentiis had this like little legal snafu that proved that like actually Universal doesn't have the claim over this story that it thinks it does, because an element of the King Kong story is now open for anyone to adapt, which is why the Dino De Laurentiis movie has an original character who, like, none of the characters are based on the 1933 King Kong. They're all original characters. That is one of the reasons that Nintendo did not have to pay Universal Studios a ton of money, and therefore exists the way it does today. But if they lost that lawsuit, Nintendo would not exist the way it does today. Donkey Kong would have been pulled from arcades, and Mario as a character probably wouldn't exist. And if Mario as a character doesn't exist, Nintendo does not exist, because Mario built Nintendo. And he probably has no idea, but I like to think it's like Italian-American solidarity between Dino and Mario, that he accidentally did Mario a huge favor without realizing it. And they should have a statue of him in Kyoto celebrating the fact that he did this amazing thing that allowed them to emerge triumphant. That was one of the weird ones.
Isn't that so crazy when you can trace back like the origins to something crazy from such innocuous beginnings? Like, I think of like, this is obviously well documented, but like J.R.R. Tolkien getting into like writing The Hobbit eventually led to the creation of the RPG genre. Like, that's a weird thing to extrapolate, but if he doesn't write The Hobbit, he doesn't write Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings heavily influences Dungeons and Dragons, and like extremely so to the point where they had to change names at one point because the Tolkien estate, I'm pretty sure, sued them. I have not done the research on this enough.
No, that's true. Hobbits and halflings. That's why they call them halflings today.
Yep. And that's what it was. And obviously D&D led to the creation of Wizardry and Ultima, which led to the creation of Dragon Quest, which led to the creation of Final Fantasy. And you have RPGs, in like tabletop RPGs and otherwise, all forms of RPG, whether Japanese or otherwise, can be traced back to the fact that he wrote The Hobbit in the 30s or whatever years it was. That's crazy to think about.
And I want to keep doing that. I want to keep doing that and like being like, okay, there's this thing. What are the roots of this thing? Where does it come from? And like do that for as many of the video games that I love, to try to like not bring them down to their base parts, but just connect them to a human history of creativity that I love. I love when humans make something. I love when humans make a game or something that like is designed to make someone else happy, and just look at like the strange trip that thing took to existing. It's like the genealogy of creativity.
I'm going to apologize to my listeners for this, because at the time when this episode comes out, it's going to be like the third time they've heard this in the last like 4 or 5 episodes. But
it happens.
Thinking this directly ties into this. I'm a big James Bond fan. Big James Bond fan. I love the new game, and I've done history of James Bond in video game panels and stuff like that. And connecting that to human history type of stuff, there's a dude named Raymond Benson who he's an author. But he has an interesting intersection between video games and James Bond in ways you wouldn't really expect. So he wrote in the early 80s, he wrote a book. It was the James Bond Bedside Compendium. It was like an unofficial type of book, but it was like a fan book essentially. But the Ian Fleming estate really enjoyed it. I guess I don't know if he wrote it with their blessing or not, but they liked what it was, and they kind of put him on their map. He would end up getting into working in both tabletop games and video games. There's a James Bond tabletop RPG from the 70s that he wrote a module for, and then in the 80s, he wrote text adventures for James Bond. He wrote a Goldfinger text adventure and a View to a Kill text adventure. He would then go on to be the lead writer and story creator for Ultima 7, The Black Gate. He also worked on PC games up into the mid-90s, like Are You Afraid of the Dark, based off the Nickelodeon show. He did The Indian in the Cupboard, based off the movie/book, like a video game probably based off the movie, in all honesty. Stuff like that. In the mid-90s, he stops because he gets tapped by the Ian Fleming Foundation or the Ian Fleming estate to be the official James Bond author. Like, after Ian Fleming passed, they are the ones that get on new authors. James Gardner was an author for a while. Anthony Horowitz, I believe, also has written Bond books, but Raymond Benson wrote the books in the mid-90s to like the early aughts, and he wrote novelizations of most of Pierce Brosnan stuff, Tomorrow Never Dies, World's Not Enough, Die Another Day, and also original books. Then he gets out of that. He doesn't go back to video games, but he starts writing novelizations of video games. He wrote a novelization of Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2. He wrote a novelization of Homefront, like the 2011, like North Korea Call of Duty clone.
Sure.
It's just wild seeing the transition go through that. So once again, listeners, I apologize. You've heard this at this point 3 or 4 times, but like, I'm just fascinated by this, like, following this man through the history of his work in James Bond. And he's also done, if you look at his Wikipedia, like, he's wrote music for musicals. He has like done the man's been all over the place. It's crazy. But yeah,
I'd never heard of him before.
Really fun, like rabbit hole to jump down. I was lucky enough to interview him on the podcast, but I'm still learning how to get more pull more information out of my interviewees, like trying to get more in-depth stuff. But he was a gem of a person. He was so nice to talk to.
Interviewing is a skill that takes a lot of practice, and I was never great at it. So I'm glad you got to interview him, though. You should. I mean, I assume this episode exists on the feed.
Yes,
but you should write about these connections at some point. That's super interesting.
I'll try to do that at some point. I'd have to. I mean, since I already recorded it, I feel weird writing about something I already like. You can hear the conversation, but I guess I don't really break it down the way I just did. And I don't know. Maybe I'll do a blog post about it. That'd be kind of cool. Yeah. But so I can relate to you in finding the enjoyment of like finding those connections of how like humanity intersects with the media that we partake in, or the art we partake in, and how it just goes in and out.
I have one for you. I have one for you that's James Bond related. If you will indulge me. Okay, so I had a martini this weekend, and it actually happened to be a Vesper martini. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking of how it's this thing. I don't think people realize that the Vesper martini is named for Vesper Lynn, mm-hmm. who is the love interest in Casino Royale. Mm-hmm. Do you know that her name is supposed to be a pun on West Berlin?
That I did not know. No.
So that's just funny. It's like a clunky bad pun. Her name is Vesper Lynn, and it's Vest, because if you're German, you pronounce your V's like W's and W's like V's. So it's Vesper Lynn. And I just think it's so funny that we have this drink that is a very elegant sophisticated drink, and it's named indirectly for a really clunky pun on West Berlin. And people probably don't think about that, but I thought about it when I was enjoying it this weekend.
That's really, I did not know that. That is wild. I mean, it fits in with all the bad innuendo puns for women's names. At least West Berlin is like, it's nothing like sexual. It's just West Berlin. Better than like freaking Holly Goodhead. Though what is it? The James Bonding podcast brought this one up. The Bond girl in Dr. No, not Honey Rider, but kind of the femme fatale Bond girl in Dr. No. Her name is Sylvia Trench, and we don't know if that's a really misogynistic way of talking about a vagina or not.
I'm almost positive that the same person who came up with the name Octopussy would have also used trench as a as that pun.
Yes. Right? Like it's almost like so on. It's like almost so on the nose with the misogyny. Yeah. It's like, well, that can't be an innuendo. Maybe it is. I don't know. When working on this, did you notice what were some of the other kind of themes or trends that you noticed through all this? So like I talked about the etymology and names. I also talked about like the Koopa mythology. Like the ones that I have as just examples of that are like Koopa branding doesn't really exist in Japan. The Koopa Kingdom doesn't exist in the games. Koopa does not equal Kappa, as tempting as a connection that might seem. And Yoshi was and maybe still is a Koopa. Like just kind of looking into the history of Koopas and stuff like that. Were there any other kind of like themes that you came across that were that jump out to you, I should say?
I'm sure there were. And here's an interesting idea for something that comes up a lot that I don't think I really thought about fully until I started working on this. And that's the idea that a lot of characters we think of as being specific characters probably aren't. And that's like Toad, Yoshi, Birdo, Kamek, or Kamek, as I have learned that his name is properly pronounced by the movies. These are all characters that exist in the games, and we think of them as solitary characters, but we actually have no way of telling when we're dealing with like Yoshi the character versus a green Yoshi who happens to just be like a generic Yoshi. Same thing with Toad. Like Toad does not exist as a single character the way he exists in the West because of Mario 2. So in Mario 2, you have the blue-capped Toad who ends up being a character in like the Super Show. And because we grew up watching Super Mario Super Show, we think of Toad as being part of the crew, who eventually gets displaced by Yoshi, which always seemed wrong to me. But like in Japan, Mario 2 didn't happen right away, and so it wasn't weird that like Toad isn't playable in like Mario 3, and like any of the Toads you see in Mario 3 are just like random Toads. And then the Toad that we get in Mario Kart, I'm not sure he's supposed to be like the Toad or just a Toad, because we also have the Koopa Troopa playable in Mario Kart. And I'm like, oh yeah, that might just be like a generic character who's tossed in and not a specific character. And the original Japanese version might not distinguish between those two the way we do. It's just a very different approach to identity and like group membership and being a single individual, but as opposed to being part of a group where you're all equal. Those are just like identity politics that we don't have working the same way in the West as they have in Japan. And this is a really interesting way to be confronted with that difference.
So you're telling me Mario has been woke this whole time is what you're telling me.
Or not, or absolutely not woke. It's either one or the other. He absolutely is, or he's absolutely not. But I'm not going to say which, and you can decide for yourself.
Fun fact: you talk about Toad, and his characterization in the Mario Super Show, that really obnoxious, high-pitched voice. Want to know a wild fun fact? The voice actor for him is John Stocker. John Stocker is the voice director of the original English dub of Sailor Moon.
Oh.
You want to see what a weird Venn diagram of that, right?
That is really weird. I never thought about that. It is interesting that he came up with that voice for that character, because like I guess what did we think he was going to sound like? But it is also interesting that like Toad's official Nintendo voice has become a lot closer to that as time has gone by compared to what he sounded like in Mario Kart. The Mario Kart 64, I mean, when he had that like high-pitched kind of effeminate voice, And now he actually kind of sounds like that Mario Super Show voice, which is like high pitched, but also like scratchy and gruff.
A little bit like it's like Brooklynish too. Mario. Yeah. I can't do a Brooklyn accent.
I can't do voices and I won't try, but that was a better attempt than I could do. Yeah.
So the reason I even found out about that though was I periodically when I have like episode slots open, I'll look for like voice actors I might be able to get a hold of. I was able to get a hold of John Stocker, and he was once again a very sweet person. He also is the voice of where is it at? He's on the Busy World of Richard Scarry cartoon, if you remember that show. He was, I think, Father Cat or whatever. I can't remember the name of everything. Yeah, just it's kind of crazy. His most recent credit, which I find really interesting, and I didn't know this was a thing. Apparently it came out in 2025. Hotel Mario: The New Adventures. He did one episode of that. I did not know that was a show.
I don't know what that is. Hotel Mario: The New Adventures?
Yeah. Creator Spiritanium. It has an IMDb page for it. I don't know if this is like sanctioned by Nintendo.
I've never even heard of that. I didn't know Hotel Mario existed in any form beyond
it's Philips. A YouTube channel. So Spiritanium is a YouTube channel, and Hotel Mario it's like a riff off the CDI stuff, apparently.
Well, they got Leslie Swan to voice Peach, so that's something.
I almost wonder though, did they get her to voice Peach, or did they take clips from the show and either use the clips or this is glass half empty, run it through an AI?
Oh, maybe you're right. I don't know. That is a mysterious thing that I was not aware of until right now.
Neither have I. I will say this is definitely not sanctioned by Nintendo. The first episode of this is Hotel Mario 2: Escape from Isle Epstein. It's 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Then Luigi versus Health Insurance. It's got Luigi Mangione, but it's Luigi Manifesto. This seems like a rage bait type of thing. I don't know if I'm going to watch this.
Apparently, they just put anything on IMDb nowadays.
President Peach's Beautiful Border Wall is the last one. Yeah, there's no way they got the voice actors for this. This is clearly like AI'd or something. I don't know. That's very confusing.
I have a feeling this won't be on IMDb for that long.
I have no idea. Because they actually got the voice actor of Mario from the Hotel Mario game from '94. Well, I shouldn't say got. I'm just going to assume used their voice. This is weird. What a wild thing. Poor John Stocker getting like associated with this.
Yeah.
Who knows? Anyway, on non-specific Mario 101 questions, more kind of like I don't know, just general Mario questions. Since you're a big Mario fan, I figured I'd ask you some of your favorites about the Mario series, highs and lows and whatnot. And then we can use that to wrap it up. It'll be the last couple questions, and then we'll go into some plugs and whatnot. So before we obviously wrap it all up, I guess for you, what's your favorite Mario game? Or if that's too much of an ask, like list.
No, I have one.
You have one? All right, what's your favorite Mario game?
Mario 2.
Mario 2? Really?
Yeah. Because you could play as the princess, and that was something that was very meaningful to me when I first got that game. And it was so weird. I like the idea that like it was early enough in the Western experience of Mario that we didn't really know what a Mario game was. So people were like, I guess this is what a Mario game is now. You're throwing vegetables at things with masks for no reason. Mm-hmm. And then Mario 3 came out and we're like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. And then it was like sort of like a weird blip on the radar, but people have come around to like it. I just like how weird it is. There's an entire page about Mario 2 stuff that I've that's mostly me getting around to answering questions I had about the way that game was. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Now, to steal a point from Retronauts, do you feel like Mario 2 gave Nintendo the permission to do more weird shit with the franchise in North America? Because that's something that I think Bob has mentioned a few times. Between that and maybe like he mentions specifically like Link's Awakening as well for the Zelda series, but like Mario 2 is such a different experience, and I almost wonder that because it was so different than the original, maybe it gave Nintendo feel like they could deviate from the formula more than they would expect in a standard sequel.
I guess maybe it did, but we kind of have never had something that's deviated quite so much in a mainline game as much as that game that Mario 2 did for Mario 1. Mm-hmm. And then Mario 3 kind of undid that progress, if you want to say it that way. I do like giving a big company making them feel like they're allowed to do something experimental, because that usually does work well. But Link's Awakening is a great game. Majora's Mask is another weird game. Mm-hmm. I think for some reason maybe they're more free to do that in like Zelda than they are in Mario, because for a long time Zelda was, well, I guess it was a big deal. I don't know. I always want more weird Mario, mm-hmm. and I feel like we don't always get it. But we'll see what the new 3D Mario game is, I guess.
I'm with you on. I think we need to give more. We need to let companies be weird, like not just. What perfect example. I'm not necessarily a fan of this game, and I'm kind of mixed on him as a game developer. Like Hideo Kojima with Death Stranding, like that shit's not my tea. I tried it. Well, I didn't really enjoy it, but that game's weird as shit, and I bought it literally because I'm like, he's going solo, and it's weird. I want more weird. I may not like this game, but I want more weird. So I bought it because I wanted more weird. And I guess we got it in some instances. I would love to see more weird Mario in general. Just like do weird shit again. And I think it was kind of cool seeing a little bit of that on the Switch. Like there was a lot, like I feel like Nintendo was more willing to like try out different IPs that they haven't done in a while on the Switch. Cause like everything was selling on that thing. So they're like, all right, let's try this. Let's try this. Even though it's a second party developers technically, like Pokemon Pokopia for the Switch too. Like that's like a really weird idea that it's a fucking Minecraft Stardew Valley where you play as Ditto. Like what do you mean?
That's I actually haven't played that one yet because I'm not a Pokemon person. But when I hear people talk about it,
you're not alone.
I'm like, oh, that sounds wild. And I'm glad people are engaging with it in a way that I wasn't necessarily expecting. People seem to like it. And that's a really good instruction for Nintendo of just like put out something weird, put out something that's like kind of a weird side project, and people might respond really favorably to it. So if they want to do that, yes. If they want to put Mario in it, also yes. If they also want to introduce a new character, I'm fine with that too.
I'm with you. We'll wrap this up though. I just looking at the time. We're getting close to the time we have to wrap this up, so we can all go eat dinner, so we can make sure we get some sustenance. So, Drew, I want to thank you once again for joining me, man. I really appreciate you setting aside so much of your time to chat about your work and chat about just video games in general. This was a really fun chat. So, where can the good people find you online if you are to be found online? And obviously, what would you like to promote?
I'm on Blue Sky at Drew G. Mackie, Mackie. And this podcast, that's how I say it on my podcast. Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games can be found at thrillingtalesofoldvideogames.com. And that's about it right now. It's very limited to the text of it. And I'm very happy writing and doing something that requires people to slow down and scroll a little bit rather than just staring at a screen while things move. If you like old video games, I'm sure I've done something on a game you care about. If not, yell at me and maybe I'll write about that game. In the future, however, I will be doing a podcast version of Thrilling Tales of Old Video Games, but it's not going to be like anything I've done before. It's going to be more of a narrative thing where I'm going deep and doing something that is like the audio equivalent of my writing, which is a little... not what most podcasts are. Let's say that.
I'm looking forward to hearing that very much so. I will make sure to include a link to everything that is available, though I know your upcoming game podcast is not out yet. So I will include a link to everything else in the show notes. And for when it does come out, you can check, obviously, thrillingtalesofoldvideogames.com, I'm assuming, to find links to that podcast there when it eventually comes out.
Yes.
For myself, you can follow me on Blue Sky at StillLoadingPodcast.com, on Instagram and Twitch at StillLoadingPod. On Twitch, I stream whenever the hell I'm able to. It really just kind of depends on my schedule and what I'm feeling. Lately, I haven't been feeling like streaming, just not been enjoying the off-stream life. But, whenever I stream, you can follow me there to get notified when I go live. If you like the show and you want to support it, the easiest way to do that is give it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use. It helps more people find the show and it pleases the algorithm gods or something along those lines. And it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For only $1 a month, you get all the episodes a little bit earlier with better audio quality, as well as access to patron voting rights, which help guide the direction of the show. In fact, by the time this episode comes out, there might be a poll going on. I'm not quite sure. A poll might have just ended or just started, but you can help guide the direction of the show for only $1 a month. For $3 a month, you get everything of the previous year, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get everything, all the previous tiers, plus 2 mini bonus episodes every month. And for $5 a month, you get all the previous years, everything I mentioned prior, plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which the name changes depending on the theme, but right now it is called Still Muppeting, which is the only Muppet movie podcast where me and my buddy Doug from the Nostalgia Marcanum podcast play the music, light the lights, and we talk about the Muppets on Still Muppeting tonight. And you can find that all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. But I think that's it. That is all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all so much for listening. Drew, thank you once again for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.